The first seal dropped without a sound. One moment, Petty Officer Marcus Webb was on point, moving through the dense Colorado forest with the careful precision of a man who'd done this 1,000 times before. The next moment, a single bullet punched through his helmet at 800 meters, and he collapsed into the pine needles like a puppet with cut strings. Before his body stopped twitching, the second seal was down. Then the third. The shots came from nowhere. No muzzle flash to betray position. No crack of displaced air to give warning. Just death delivered with surgical precision from hidden positions scattered through the mountain terrain. Staff Sergeant Elena Reeves pressed herself flat against the massive trunk of a pine tree as another round slammed into the bark 3 feet from her head. Splinters exploded outward. The sharp scent of fresh sap filled her nostrils. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her mind was already working, already calculating, already analyzing what everyone else was too terrified to see. 6 enemy snipers, 6 of the best shooters the enemy had, embedded in these mountains for months, killing American forces with absolute impunity. The SEALs had called them ghosts, untouchable, unstoppable. Command had called them a strategic threat requiring massive intervention, airstrikes, artillery, a full company operation with estimated costs exceeding $20 million and 3 weeks of careful planning. The mission brief had been crystal clear: observe and report, do not engage, wait for the professionals to handle it. But the ghosts had engaged first, and now waiting for backup wasn't an option. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison's voice cut through the chaos on the radio, barely controlled panic bleeding through his professional tone. Snipers, multiple positions, get to cover now. The 12-man SEAL team scattered like birds from buckshot. Some dove behind trees, others scrambled for rocks. A few threw themselves into shallow depressions in the forest floor, praying the earth would protect them from bullets that came from angles they couldn't predict. It didn't. Another SEAL screamed as a round caught him in the shoulder. Senior Chief Daniel Parker spun like a top, crashing into the underbrush, with blood already soaking through his uniform. Petty Officer Ryan Coleman tried to reach him, tried to drag him to safety, and caught a bullet in the thigh that shattered his femur like glass. 30 seconds into the ambush, the 12-man team was down to 9 effective operators. 3 dead or dying, pinned down in a forest that had become a shooting gallery with an enemy they couldn't see and couldn't fight. Elle watched it all from her position mid-formation. While the SEALs panicked, her training took over. 3 years of working intelligence hadn't erased the instincts that had been burned into her during 2 combat deployments and 3 years of the most intensive sniper training the United States Army could provide. Her eyes tracked the bullet impacts. Her ears caught the microsecond delays between shots. Her mind built a 3-dimensional map of the battlefield, calculating trajectories and timing, identifying probable firing positions based on angle and elevation. She spotted the first enemy position within 2 minutes. Rocky outcrop 700 meters upslope, offering perfect elevation and concealment. The shooter would be prone, maybe in a natural depression between boulders, using vegetation for camouflage and a professional-grade hide that would be invisible to anyone who didn't know exactly what to look for. The second position revealed itself when a slight disturbance of pine needles betrayed muzzle gas. Subtle, almost invisible, but Elle's trained eye caught it. Ridgeline 600 meters northeast, likely behind a fallen log that created natural cover while providing clear sight lines to multiple approach vectors. She keyed her radio, keeping her voice steady despite the adrenaline screaming through her system. "Morrison, this is Reeves. I can counter-snipe. I have training." The response came back sharp and dismissive. "Negative, Reeves. Your intel. Stay in your lane and wait for air support." Another SEAL screamed as a round caught him in the leg. 8 effectives now, more wounded who needed immediate medical attention they couldn't provide while pinned down by enemy fire from positions they couldn't identify and couldn't suppress. Hospital Corpsman Emma Sullivan was trying to reach Coleman, trying to stop the arterial bleeding from his shattered femur, but she couldn't get to him. Every time she moved, bullets stitched the ground around her, forcing her back into cover. Elle watched Coleman's blood spreading across the forest floor. She watched Webb's body cooling in the afternoon sun. She watched Parker clutching his ruined shoulder face going white from blood loss and shock. And she made her decision. Morrison could court-martial her later. Right now, good people were dying and she had the skills to stop it. She moved, low and fast through the underbrush using terrain features that the SEALs either didn't see or didn't know how to exploit. Every depression in the ground became concealment. Every tree trunk became cover. Every shadow became a pathway that kept her hidden from the enemy positions she'd already identified. She covered 30 meters in less than a minute, reaching a cluster of boulders that offered both concealment from the enemy and clear shooting angles toward their positions. Her M110 SAS rifle came off her shoulder with the practiced ease of 10,000 repetitions. 7.62 millimeter NATO suppressed to reduce acoustic signature, accurate to 800 meters in the right hands. And Elle Reeves had the right hands. She settled into position behind the largest boulder, letting her body remember movements she hadn't made in 3 years, slowing her breathing, dropping her heart rate, becoming perfectly, absolutely still. Through her scope, she scanned the rocky outcrop where she'd calculated the first sniper was positioned. Nothing visible at first, just rocks and vegetation that looked completely natural to any untrained observer. But Elle wasn't untrained. There, a shadow that was too uniform, a shape that didn't quite match the natural terrain. The sniper was using a camouflage net professional-grade material that blended perfectly with the surrounding rocks and brush. Most people would never spot him. Most people would walk right past without ever knowing death was watching them. Elle wasn't most people. She calculated the shot with the cold precision of a mathematician solving an equation. 715 meters, wind approximately 8 miles per hour left to right, elevation angle about 15 degrees, temperature 72 degrees Fahrenheit, all factors that affected bullet trajectory at extended range. She made minute adjustments to her scope, compensating for every variable, then settled the crosshairs on where she knew the sniper's head would be. Not on the visible shadow, slightly left of that, accounting for the camouflage net's offset. 6 inches left, maybe 7, where the skull would be hiding behind fabric that made him feel safe. She controlled her breathing. Slow exhale, natural pause. The moment between heartbeats when the body is perfectly still. Squeeze. The M110 coughed the suppressor, reducing the report to a sharp crack that echoed differently than the enemy's unsuppressed shots. Through her scope, she saw the camouflage net twitch, then collapse slightly inward. The first enemy sniper was down, but there were 5 more, and they'd just learned that someone was shooting back. Immediately, fire shifted toward her position. Rounds snapped through the air overhead. Others impacted the rocks around her, throwing up sprays of stone chips and dust. The enemy snipers were trying to bracket her location, suppress her, keep her from engaging again. Elle rolled left, moving to a new position 10 meters away before they could dial in her range. She'd learned this lesson in her first week of sniper school, learned it from a grizzled Marine instructor who'd survived 4 deployments by never making the same mistake twice. Never shoot twice from the same position. Move, shoot, move again. The instructor's voice echoed in her memory, gravelly and certain. Master Gunnery Sergeant Frank Callahan, the most decorated sniper in Marine Corps history, the man who'd made her into what she was. Rule number 1, Reeves, he'd said during a training exercise in the Georgia heat, standing over her as she lay prone behind a rifle that felt too heavy for her 23-year-old frame. The sniper who stays in position is the sniper who dies. Shoot and move. Every time. No exceptions. She'd followed that rule through 2 deployments, through 43 confirmed kills, through operations that had saved countless American lives, and then through 1 terrible shot that had ended an innocent life because the intelligence had been wrong. Elle shoved that memory down, locked it away in the dark place where it lived most days. Right now, the intelligence was perfect. Right now, she knew exactly who the enemy was. Right now, every trigger pull would save lives instead of taking them wrongly. From her new position, she scanned for the second sniper, the one on the ridgeline behind the fallen log. He'd adjusted after seeing his partner go down, was now more alert, more careful. His training was showing. He knew someone was hunting him, but he'd made a mistake. In shifting to get a better angle on her original position, he'd exposed the top of his ghillie suit above the log, just a few inches, barely visible even through magnified optics. Enough. Shot 2, 625 meters. Different wind conditions because of the ridgeline deflecting air currents. She had to account for that deflection, calculate how the terrain feature would push the bullet right when the wind wanted to push it left. Elle made the calculations in seconds, muscle memory, and thousands of hours behind a scope, combining to solve problems faster than conscious thought could manage. The ghillie suit jerked. The second enemy sniper was eliminated. 4 left. The remaining enemy snipers went silent. Completely, utterly silent. No more shots. No more movement. They'd stopped engaging the SEALs, stopped trying to kill the pinned-down team, because now they had a different priority. Now they were hunting the hunter. Elle relocated again, moving 40 meters downslope through undergrowth so thick it tore at her uniform and drew blood from her hands. She found a position in vegetation dense enough to make her almost invisible, offering limited visibility but excellent concealment. From here, she couldn't see much of the battlefield, but she could watch the approaches, could monitor the routes the enemy snipers would have to use if they wanted better angles on the SEAL team. And she waited. Patience, the sniper's greatest weapon. The ability to remain absolutely still, absolutely focused while hours passed and the body screamed for movement. 5 minutes ticked by, then 10. The forest was quiet except for the distant sound of SEALs treating their wounded, consolidating their positions, whispering urgently into radios as they called for air support that was still 40 minutes away. Morrison kept trying to raise her on the radio, demanding to know her position, demanding she stand down and wait for backup. Elle ignored him. She was committed now. The only way out was through. 15 minutes. 20. Then movement. A flash of brown fabric between trees 400 meters out, barely visible through the dense vegetation. One of the enemy snipers was relocating, trying to get a flanking position on the SEALs, circling around to hit them from an unexpected angle. Elle tracked him through her scope patient as stone, waiting for him to present a clear shot. He was good, moved in short bursts, used cover well, never stayed exposed for more than a second or two. Professional movement, professional tactics, the kind of skills that came from serious training and real combat experience. But he made one mistake. He paused behind a tree to scan with his binoculars, checking the area ahead before committing to the next movement. For just a moment, his shoulder and part of his head were visible past the trunk. It was enough. Shot 3, 430 meters. Straightforward shot compared to the first two. Minimal win, good visibility, clear line of sight. The enemy sniper collapsed behind the tree and didn't move again. 3 down, 3 to go. But now the remaining enemy snipers knew they were facing someone with serious capabilities, someone who could spot them through professional concealment, someone who could make shots they'd thought impossible, someone who was hunting them with the same precision they'd used to hunt Americans for 3 months. They adapted. Elle saw the muzzle flash a microsecond before she heard the shot. One of the remaining snipers firing at her from an angle she hadn't expected, a position she hadn't identified. The round impacted 6 inches from her head, showering her with bark and splinters, filling her mouth with the taste of wood pulp and fear. She rolled hard right as 2 more shots hit where she'd been lying. They triangulated her position, were trying to bracket her with coordinated fire. The kind of tactics that required multiple shooters working together, communicating, synchronizing their shots to trap their target in a crossfire. Time to move. Time to get out of the kill zone before they could close it completely. Elle low-crawled 15 meters through undergrowth that tore her uniform and scraped her skin raw. Then she pushed upslope another 20 meters, breathing hard, weapon clutched tight against her chest, adrenaline turning her blood to jet fuel. When she reached a new position, a small depression behind a fallen tree that offered decent cover and good concealment, she was 50 meters from where the enemy thought she was. Far enough that their coordinated fire was hitting empty ground. Close enough that she could still engage effectively. Through her scope, she scanned the area where those shots had originated. 2 snipers working together, coordinating their fire. Smart tactics, much harder to counter than individual shooters. She spotted one of them first. Positioned in a tree stand 20 feet up in a massive oak, using the elevation for better visibility and extended range. Brilliant position, almost impossible to assault conventionally, but also exposed from certain angles. From below, from someone who knew to look up instead of out. Elle had that angle. Shot 4, 520 meters. Upward angle compensating for the height. Branches partially obscuring the target. She had to thread the bullet through gaps in the foliage. Trust her calculations, trust her training, trust that the round would find flesh instead of wood. The round punched through the wooden platform the sniper was lying on, traveled through his body armor, and into his chest cavity, and he tumbled from the tree in a graceless fall that ended with a wet thud 20 feet below. Immediately, the fifth sniper fired at her muzzle flash. Elle was already moving, but the round caught the stock of her M110, splintering the wood and sending the rifle spinning from her hands. She grabbed it mid-tumble, checked the damage. The weapon was still functional, but the stock was cracked, could break completely if she wasn't careful. She'd have to manage the recoil differently now. Couldn't let it slam back into her shoulder with full force, or the crack would become a break and the rifle would be useless. And she had another problem. She checked her magazine. 3 rounds left. No more reloads. She'd brought limited ammunition because she was supposed to be just an analyst, just there to observe and advise not to engage in combat operations. 2 enemy snipers remaining. 3 bullets in her rifle. The math was getting tight. For the next 3 minutes, it became a deadly game of cat and mouse. The enemy snipers would fire, trying to pin her down. She'd relocate, find a new angle, search for them through her scope. They were good, among the best she'd ever faced. They moved like ghosts, used every bit of cover, coordinated their movements to cover each other. But Elle had one advantage they didn't account for. She'd been tracking their patterns, learning how they thought, predicting their next moves based on terrain and tactical logic. Callahan had taught her this during an advanced course standing beside her in the Georgia woods as they analyzed enemy movement patterns from past operations. "Good snipers shoot well," he'd said, his weathered face serious in the dappled sunlight. "Great snipers think well. They don't just react to what they see. They predict what they're going to see. They understand that terrain dictates movement and movement reveals position. Learn to read terrain like a book and you'll always be 3 steps ahead." Elle read the terrain now, saw where the 5th sniper had positioned himself, where he'd moved from where he'd move next based on the tactical situation and available cover. When he relocated to what he thought was a perfect flanking position, Elle was already set up waiting for him. He appeared in her scope, moving between 2 boulders, confident he was unseen. Shot 5, 380 meters. Center mass because she only had a brief window and couldn't risk a headshot. The enemy sniper went down hard. 1 enemy sniper left. 2 bullets remaining. The last sniper was the best of them all. Elle could tell by how he moved, how he anticipated her positions, how he'd stayed alive while 5 partners were eliminated. He was playing it smart now, staying hidden, not taking shots unless he was certain of the kill, making her come to him instead of exposing himself by coming to her. The problem was she was running out of ammunition and time. 2 bullets, 1 enemy. And if she didn't finish this soon, the SEALs were going to bleed out while waiting for air support that was still 30 minutes away. She repositioned again, moving upslope toward where she calculated the last sniper would be. The terrain narrowed here. Rocky cliffs on one side, steep drop on the other. Limited positions available. Only 3 locations that offered the combination of concealment, sightlines, and escape routes that a professional sniper would require. Elle checked the first position. Empty. The second. Nothing. That left the third. A natural rock formation that created a perfect hide with commanding views of the entire valley. If she were the enemy sniper, if she needed to go to ground and wait for the hunter to expose herself, that's where she'd be. She approached from below, using dead ground to mask her movement, making herself as small as possible as she worked her way upslope. Every sound felt magnified. Every breath felt too loud. Her damaged rifle felt like an anchor dragging her down. When she finally had an angle on the position, she settled in, controlled her breathing, and scanned through her scope. At first, nothing, just rocks and vegetation. The perfect hide looked empty, abandoned, like no one had ever been there. Then she saw it, the tiniest flicker of movement, a micro-adjustment as the sniper shifted positions slightly, probably dealing with a cramp, or repositioning for better comfort during the long wait. The enemy sniper was there, camouflaged so perfectly, he was almost invisible. Professional-grade hide, years of experience, skills honed through countless operations. But Elle had seen the movement, had identified the position. Now she just needed a shot. The problem was simple and terrible. She couldn't see enough of him to take a clean shot. Just a few inches of what might be his shoulder, partially obscured by rock and vegetation. A low percentage shot at best. The kind of shot that was more likely to hit stone than flesh, more likely to waste a bullet she couldn't spare than to eliminate the threat. But it was the only shot she had. Elle calculated everything one final time. 290 meters. Minimal wind at this lower angle. The real challenge wasn't external ballistics. It was target identification through obstruction. If she was wrong about what she was seeing, she'd waste a round and give away her position. If she was right but hit rock instead of tissue, same result. She had to trust her training, trust her instincts, trust the thousands of hours she'd spent behind a scope learning to see what others couldn't see, to know what others couldn't know. Callahan's voice echoed in her memory from that last day at Fort Benning when she'd graduated top of her class and he'd pulled her aside for a private conversation. "You have a gift, Reeves," he'd said, his sharp eyes studying her with an intensity that made her stand straighter. "Not just skill. Plenty of shooters have skill. You have instinct. The ability to see the shot before it exists. To know things you shouldn't be able to know. Trust that. When everything else fails, when the calculations don't add up and the situation doesn't make sense, trust your instincts. They've been earned." Elle trusted them now. She took the shot. Through her scope, she saw the impact. The shoulder jerked backward, but the sniper didn't go down. Didn't collapse. Didn't fall from the hide. Wounded, still combat effective, still dangerous. And now he knew exactly where she was. Return fire came immediately, the wounded enemy sniper putting rounds toward her position with desperate accuracy. Elle rolled away as bullets chewed up the ground where she'd been, threw herself into a shallow depression, came up with her heart hammering, and one round left in her magazine. One bullet. One enemy sniper wounded but still fighting. And no time to do anything except finish this or die trying. Every sniper doctrine said to maintain distance. Use range to your advantage. Stay back, stay hidden, wait for the perfect shot. Never close with the enemy. Never give up your primary advantage of distance and concealment. Elle stood up and started running uphill. She broke cover and charged directly toward the enemy position. Weapon ready, eyes forward, every instinct screaming that this was suicide, that she was violating every rule she'd ever learned, that this was exactly how snipers got themselves killed. But she didn't have time for doctrine. Didn't have distance or ammunition or options. She had one bullet and one enemy and 8 dying SEALs who needed this to end right now. The enemy sniper fired. The round passed so close to her head, she felt the pressure wave, felt the heat of the bullet's passage, felt death miss her by inches. He fired again. This round caught her sleeve, tore through fabric without touching skin so close she could smell burning cotton. Elle dove behind a boulder 20 meters from the enemy position. One round left. Breathing hard, adrenaline turning everything sharp and bright and impossibly clear. She could hear him moving in his hide. Could hear the scrape of boots on stone, the rustle of fabric, the labored breathing of a wounded man trying to relocate, trying to reach better ground, trying to stay in the fight despite the bullet hole in his shoulder. Elle stood, brought her rifle to her shoulder, scanned the position through her scope. There. The enemy sniper climbing out of his hide, trying to get to higher ground where his wounded shoulder wouldn't be such a disadvantage. Moving awkward, favoring his left side rifle clutched in one hand while the other hung useless. Their eyes met through their respective scopes. A frozen moment where both snipers recognized the other's skill, acknowledged the deadly game they'd been playing, saw in each other the same dedication to craft and mission and victory at any cost. Elle's finger found the trigger, found that familiar space between the first stage and the second, that moment of decision that every shooter knows, that instant where everything hangs in perfect balance. And in that instant, she saw another face, another scope, another target that had turned out to be innocent. 3 years ago, a compound in Afghanistan that intelligence had marked as hostile. A teenage boy who'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time holding what looked like a weapon through long-range optics, but turned out to be farming tools. A shot she'd made with perfect precision and absolute confidence. A shot that had haunted every night since. Elle had left active sniping after that. Had requested transfer to intelligence, thinking she could save lives with information instead of bullets, thinking she could avoid ever making that terrible mistake again. But Callahan had been right. Running from yourself didn't work. The skills didn't disappear. The ability didn't fade. It just waited, patient and inevitable, for the moment when it would be needed again. This was that moment. And this time the intelligence was perfect. This time she knew exactly who the enemy was. This time the shot would save lives instead of taking them wrongly. Elle took the final shot, the enemy sniper fell, the forest went silent. 18 minutes from the first shot to the last. 6 enemy snipers eliminated. 0 American casualties after Elle had engaged. She keyed her radio, forcing her voice steady despite the adrenaline crash already beginning. Morrison, this is Reeves. All 6 enemy snipers neutralized. You're clear to treat wounded and call for evac. There was a long pause. Then Morrison's voice came back carrying a note of absolute disbelief that would have been funny under different circumstances. Reeves, did you just all 6 of them? Affirmative. I'll need an ammo resupply, though. I'm Winchester. Elle walked back down the slope toward where the SEAL team was consolidating. Her legs felt like rubber. Her hands were shaking from adrenaline and exhaustion. Her damaged rifle weighed 1,000 pounds. As she emerged from the tree line, 8 surviving SEALs were staring at her like she'd just walked out of a legend they'd heard but never quite believed. Morrison was the first to speak. His expression caught somewhere between shock and grudging respect. Want to explain how an intelligence analyst just eliminated 6 enemy snipers that we've been trying to deal with for 3 months? Elle slung her damaged rifle across her back and met his eyes with the calm of someone who'd just done exactly what needed to be done. I'm not just an intelligence analyst, Commander. Elle Reeves stood before the 8 surviving SEALs with her damaged rifle slung across her back, dirt and blood streaking her uniform, pine needles caught in her hair. The forest around them was finally quiet. No more shots, no more screaming, just the sound of wind through trees and the labored breathing of wounded men who were still alive because of what she'd done in the last 18 minutes. Morrison stared at her, waiting for an explanation that would make sense of the impossible thing he'd just witnessed. Elle met his gaze without flinching. I'm not just an intelligence analyst, Commander. I was Army sniper qualified 8 years ago. Top of my class at Fort Benning. Trained by Master Gunnery Sergeant Frank Callahan. She watched recognition flash across Morrison's face at the name. Every special operations soldier knew Callahan. Marine legend. 94 confirmed kills across Desert Storm, Somalia, Afghanistan, and Iraq. The sniper instructor who trained half the elite shooters currently in the field. 3 years in sniper school. Elle continued, her voice steady and factual. 2 combat deployments between 2018 and 2021. 43 confirmed kills. I worked as a designated marksman instructor before transferring to intelligence 3 years ago. She paused, letting that information sink in while the SEALs processed what it meant. I analyze enemy sniper tactics because I used to be one, but everyone sees the intelligence insignia on my uniform and assumes that's all I can do. Senior Chief Daniel Parker was sitting propped against a tree, one hand pressed against his wounded shoulder, his face pale from blood loss but his eyes sharp with professional assessment. Despite the pain that had to be screaming through his body, he laughed. It was a short, bitter sound that held equal parts pain and admiration. 43. He shook his head slowly. Make that 49 now. Those weren't just good shots, Reeves. Oh, that tree stand killed the one through the camouflage net we couldn't even see. Those are Hall of Fame level. Emma Sullivan, the team's corpsman, was still working on Coleman's shattered femur, her hands moving with practiced efficiency as she packed the wound and secured the temporary stabilization that would keep him alive until they could get him to a real hospital. She looked up at Elle, her face streaked with someone else's blood. Whatever your background, you saved our asses. We'd all be dead if you hadn't engaged. Tyler Grant, the youngest member of the team, at 23, stepped forward. His hands were shaking slightly, adrenaline and fear still working through his system. His voice came out rough, caught between shame and gratitude. Ma'am, I need to apologize. Elle turned to face him, waiting. Before this mission, during the briefing, I heard some of the guys saying you'd slow us down. That having an intel analyst in the field was dead weight. That you'd be a liability we'd have to protect instead of an asset we could use. He swallowed hard. I believe them. I'm sorry. Elle studied the young SEAL for a moment, seeing in his face the same assumptions she'd encountered 100 times since transferring to intelligence. The automatic dismissal. The casual underestimation. The invisible wall that came down the moment people saw her current job instead of her complete capabilities. Grant, don't apologize for making assumptions based on limited information. That's human nature. The lesson here isn't to feel bad about it. The lesson is to remember that job titles don't tell you everything about a person's capabilities. She gestured to the intelligence insignia on her uniform. I don't advertise my sniper background because I'm trying to build a career in intelligence work. But that doesn't mean the skills disappeared. They don't disappear. They just wait for the moment they're needed. Morrison had been quiet during this exchange, but now he moved forward, his expression serious. Those 6 snipers you just eliminated, command has been trying to deal with them for 3 months. They'd killed 24 Americans. 24 operators who didn't come home because those 6 were positioned in terrain that made conventional assault nearly impossible. He pulled out a tactical map, unfolded it on a flat rock, and pointed to the area they were in. Command had been planning a massive operation to eliminate them. Airstrikes, artillery, full company assault. Estimated cost was over $20 million, 3 weeks of prep time and significant risk of friendly casualties during the ground operation. Morrison looked up at Elle and something had changed in his eyes. The skepticism was gone, replaced by something that looked like respect mixed with disbelief. You just did it in 18 minutes with a rifle and 9 rounds of ammunition. Elle said nothing. What was there to say? The numbers spoke for themselves. Come on, Morrison said, standing up and shouldering his weapon. Let's secure the area and document these positions while we wait for extraction. Intel's going to want everything we can gather. They moved as a team through the forest, Elle helping where she could while her analyst's mind automatically cataloged details that would be valuable for future operations. Morrison called her over to the first enemy position, the rocky outcrop where she'd made her opening shot. The dead sniper was still in place, his camouflage net perfectly arranged around him, his weapon a high-end Russian SVD Dragunov with premium optics. Everything about the position screamed professional. Pre-sighted ranges marked on rocks with small chalk symbols. Multiple fallback positions prepared. Escape routes planned and cleared. Morrison crouched beside the body, his expression grim. This guy was a professional. Look at this setup. He's been here for weeks, maybe months. Knows this terrain like his own backyard. Elle knelt beside the position, examining the weapon and equipment with the clinical detachment of someone who understood exactly what she was looking at. She pointed to wear marks on the rifle's stock. Look at the weapon wear. This rifle has seen extensive use. Years of operations, not months. Then she indicated small scratches carved into the wooden stock, deliberate marks arranged in groups of 5 with a slash through each group. Tally marks. This sniper had at least 18 kills marked on his weapon. Morrison's face went hard. 18 American operators. And you took him out with one shot through camouflage netting we couldn't even see. I calculated where his head would be based on position geometry and shooting lane angles. Elle explained, falling into instructor mode without thinking about it. The netting offset was approximately 6 inches left of the visible shadow. I compensated for that in my aim point. It's a technique called geometric probability targeting. Master Gunnery Sergeant Callahan taught it to me during advanced training. He learned it studying Iraqi Republican Guard sniper positions during Desert Storm. They moved to the second position, the ridgeline, where the enemy had hidden behind the fallen log. Equally professional setup. Multiple shooting lanes carefully prepared. Escape routes mapped out. This sniper had been planning to operate here indefinitely. Elle studied the position, her mind working through the tactical implications. These snipers weren't just good shooters operating independently. They were a coordinated cell. Look at how the positions overlap. Each one covers the others, mutually supporting fields of fire, pre-planned fallback routes that all lead to rally points. This was a well-oiled machine. Parker had made his way over, despite his wounded shoulder, refusing to stay down while there was work to be done. Until they ran into someone better, he said, his voice carrying a note of grim satisfaction. 6 of their was versus 1 of ours. I know which side won. The sound of helicopter rotors interrupted them. A CH-47 Chinook descended into a clearing 200 meters away, rotors kicking up a storm of pine needles and dust. The cavalry had finally arrived 43 minutes after the ambush started. 43 minutes too late to matter, but in time to evacuate the wounded and the dead. The crew chief jumped out as soon as the wheels touched down, taking in the scene with experienced eyes. Multiple casualties being loaded on the stretchers. Blood-soaked uniforms. the grim faces of men who'd just survived something that should have killed them all. "What the hell happened out here?" he shouted over the rotor noise. Morrison gestured to the wounded being carried toward the Chinook. "Enemy sniper ambush, 6 hostiles embedded in defensive positions, all 6 eliminated by counter-sniper fire." The crew chief's eyes widened. 6? How many counter-snipers did you have? Morrison looked at Elle, who was helping Emma Sullivan load Coleman onto the helicopter, her slight frame struggling with the weight of a man twice her size, but refusing to let anyone else take over. "Just one, and she's supposed to be an intelligence analyst." The crew chief followed Morrison's gaze, taking in Elle's intelligence insignia, her torn uniform, her dirty face, the damaged rifle still slung across her back. His expression went through several rapid changes as he tried to reconcile what he was seeing with what Morrison had just told him. Parker being loaded onto a stretcher, despite his protests that he could walk, added his own commentary. 18 minutes from first shot to last. 6 targets, 6 kills, 0 misses. I've been doing this for 12 years and I've never seen shooting like that. The flight back to base was quiet. The SEALs were processing what had happened, dealing with wounds and shock in the aftermath of adrenaline. Elle sat alone near the rear ramp, watching the mountains fall away beneath them. She pulled 6 empty casings from her pocket, the brass still warm from firing. 6 rounds that had ended 6 lives. She lined them up on her knee, looking at each one, remembering the moment of trigger. Pull the sight picture through the scope, the small movements that had meant the difference between life and death. Grant made his way over and sat beside her, careful not to crowd her space. "What are you thinking about?" Elle was quiet for a long moment before answering. "Every bullet has consequences, even when it's necessary, especially when it's necessary." She held up the casings so he could see them in the afternoon light, filtering through the helicopter's windows. 3 years ago, I took a shot based on bad intelligence. The target was supposed to be an insurgent carrying a weapon. Turned out to be a teenage boy carrying farming tools. I can still see his face, still see the moment of impact, still see his body falling. Her voice was steady, but Grant could hear the weight beneath the words. "That shot haunts me every single night. It's why I transferred to intelligence. I thought if I could prevent those mistakes, if I could make sure the information was right before anyone pulled a trigger, I could save lives without having to take them. But today you had to take them anyway," Grant said quietly. "Today the intelligence was perfect. Today I knew exactly who the enemy was. Today every trigger pull saved American lives instead of taking innocent ones." She put the casings back in her pocket, each one clinking softly against the others. "Emma couldn't reach Coleman. He was bleeding out while we watched. You and Morrison and Parker were pinned down by fire you couldn't return because you couldn't see the shooters. Webb was already dead. More people were going to die if someone didn't act." Grant nodded slowly. "You saved my life today. Coleman would have bled out before air support arrived. Emma was taking fire every time she tried to reach him. Whatever happened 3 years ago today, you made it right." Morrison, who'd been sitting close enough to overhear, added his own thoughts. "Or maybe you proved that skills don't define who you are. How you use them does. You could have stayed hidden, could have followed orders and waited for backup. Instead, you put yourself at risk to save people who'd underestimated you. That says more about your character than any number of confirmed kills." The pilot's voice came through the intercom. "Command wants you in the operations center immediately upon landing. Every senior officer on base is waiting. This is unprecedented." Elle closed her eyes, suddenly tired in a way that went deeper than physical exhaustion. "Why would they want me specifically?" Morrison's answer was simple and direct. "Because you just did in 18 minutes what we couldn't do in 3 months. Those 6 snipers command had been planning a massive operation. Airstrikes, artillery, full company assault. Estimated cost was $20 million, 3 weeks of preparation, and significant risk of casualties during the ground assault." He leaned forward, making sure Elle was listening. "You just saved them all of that with a rifle and 9 rounds of ammunition. They want to know how. They want to know everything. Because what you did today changes the calculus on how we deal with embedded sniper threats." Elle opened her eyes and looked out at the mountains passing below. "It wasn't complicated. I just used the training Callahan gave me. identified positions based on terrain analysis, calculated shots based on environmental factors, moved between engagements to prevent counter-targeting. Basic sniper doctrine combined with intelligence analysis. Basic, Morrison repeated his tone, making it clear what he thought of that assessment. Reeves, there's nothing basic about threading a bullet through camouflage netting. You couldn't see through to hit a target, you had to calculate geometrically. There's nothing basic about identifying 6 professional hides that we walked right past without spotting. And there's definitely nothing basic about charging uphill with 1 round left to finish a wounded enemy sniper in close quarters. Elle didn't respond. What could she say? From her perspective, she'd done what needed to be done using skills she'd spent years developing. From Morrison's perspective, she'd performed miracles. The truth was probably somewhere in between. The Chinook landed on the base helipad 2 hours after the ambush started. Medical personnel swarmed the aircraft, immediately pulling wounded SEALs onto gurneys, shouting orders, moving with practiced efficiency, born from too many similar scenes. Morrison grabbed Elle's arm as she started to follow the wounded off the helicopter. Clean yourself up first, change uniforms. You're about to brief every senior officer on this base. You need to look professional, not like you just fought a one-woman war in the mountains. Elle looked down at herself. Blood on her uniform, not all of it hers. Dirt ground into every surface. Tears in the fabric from crawling through underbrush. Pine needles still caught in her tactical vest. Right, professional. She made her way to the barracks, moving on autopilot, and stood under a shower that was too hot and lasted too long. The water running off her body was brown with dirt and pink with diluted blood. She watched it circle the drain, watched 3 years of running from herself wash away with it. Callahan had been right. You couldn't escape who you were. The skills didn't disappear just because you stopped using them. They waited, patient and inevitable, for the moment they'd be needed again. That moment had come today, and Elle had been ready. 2 hours after landing, she stood in the operations center wearing a fresh uniform, with every crease perfect and every insignia properly placed. The room was packed with senior officers, intelligence personnel, sniper instructors, and mission planners. Everyone who'd heard about the Colorado operation wanted to understand how one operator had accomplished what entire teams had failed to achieve. Colonel Patricia Hayes, the senior officer on base, stood at the front of the room beside a large tactical map of the operation area. Staff Sergeant Reeves, we've reviewed the preliminary after-action reports from Commander Morrison and his team. Now we'd like to hear it from you. Walk us through your engagement. Elle moved to the map, her movements precise and economical. She marked the SEAL team's position when the ambush started, then began marking enemy positions as she spoke. First sniper here, rocky outcrop 715 meters from my engagement position. Camouflage netting made him invisible to visual identification. I spotted him by shadow inconsistency and unnatural geometry in the rock formation. She described the shot in technical detail. Wind speed and direction, elevation angle, temperature, the calculations that had to be made in seconds. The geometric probability targeting that let her hit a target she couldn't directly see. A Marine gunnery sergeant in his mid-50s interrupted his weathered face skeptical. You made that shot through camouflage netting you couldn't see through. I calculated where his head would be based on position geometry and shooting lane angles. The netting offset was approximately 6 inches left of the visible shadow. I compensated for that in my aim point. That's not just marksmanship, the instructor said slowly. That's tactical problem solving at a level most snipers never reach. Where'd you learn that technique? Master Gunnery Sergeant Frank Callahan taught it to me during advanced training at Fort Benning in 2017. He developed the methodology studying enemy sniper positions during Desert Storm, called it geometric probability targeting. The instructor's eyes widened slightly. Frank Callahan trained you? Yes, sir. He was sniper school commandant during my time there. Frank's a legend, the instructor said, his tone shifting from skeptical to respectful. 94 confirmed kills across 4 conflicts. If he trained you personally, that explains a lot. Elle continued through the engagement, describing each shot with the same technical precision. The second sniper on the ridgeline, the calculations needed to account for wind deflection around terrain features. The third sniper relocating through the forest, the patience required to wait for him to present a target. The fourth sniper in the tree by 8 degrees stand, the complexity of the upward angle shot through partial obstruction. When she reached the fifth and sixth kills, Colonel Hayes leaned forward. This is where it gets interesting. You had limited ammunition at this point. Walk us through your decision-making. I had 3 rounds left and 2 enemy snipers remaining. Both were highly skilled and working together in coordinated fashion. My weapon stock was damaged, affecting recoil management. The tactical situation was deteriorating. Wounded SEALs needed immediate medical attention. Air support was still 25 minutes out. L marked the positions on the map. I identified the 5th sniper's probable next position based on terrain analysis and tactical logic. Set up and waited for him to relocate. When he moved between these 2 boulders, I had a 3-second window for a center mass shot at 380 meters. Took the shot. Target eliminated. That left 1 round and 1 enemy, Hayes said. The final engagement. The last sniper was the most skilled of the group. He'd stayed alive while 5 partners were eliminated by not taking unnecessary risks. I had to force the engagement because time was critical. L described the search through 3 possible positions, the eventual identification of the final hide, the low percentage shot through obstruction that wounded but didn't eliminate the target. At that point, I had 1 round remaining and a wounded but still combat-effective enemy who knew my exact position. Doctrine says to maintain distance and wait for a clean shot, but I didn't have the time or ammunition for doctrine. So you charged uphill, Hayes said, her voice carefully neutral. You violated every principle of sniper engagement and closed to hand-to-hand distance with 1 bullet left. Yes, ma'am, I'd wounded him and he knew my position. Staying at range meant a prolonged engagement I couldn't win with damaged weapon and no ammunition. By closing distance aggressively, I forced him out of his comfort zone, made him react to my initiative instead of executing his plan. L met Hayes' eyes directly. It was high risk, but the calculated odds were better than the alternative, which was watching American service members bleed out while I played it safe. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Hayes spoke again, and there was something different in her voice. Not just respect, understanding. Aggressive decision-making combined with technical precision. That's a rare combination, Reeves. Most snipers are methodical to the point of being passive. They wait for the perfect shot even when the tactical situation demands action. Most snipers haven't worked intelligence operations, ma'am. My analyst training taught me to assess probabilities and make decisions based on incomplete information under time pressure. I combined that skill set with my sniper training, patience when it was tactically sound, aggression when the situation demanded it. Commander James Reed, the intelligence chief, had been taking notes throughout the briefing. Now he set down his pen and addressed the room. The positions Staff Sergeant Reeves identified and documented represent intelligence gold. She didn't just eliminate an immediate threat, she gathered tactical information that will save lives in future operations. He pulled up satellite imagery on the main screen. We've been tracking a larger pattern. These 6 snipers in Colorado weren't an isolated cell. We have intelligence suggesting a coordinated training program producing similar cells across the entire region. Staff Sergeant Reeves's tactical documentation of their methods, positioning patterns, and operational procedures is key to identifying and neutralizing other cells. Elle felt something cold settle in her stomach. How many other cells, sir? Unknown. But based on pattern analysis of sniper incidents over the past 18 months, we estimate potentially dozens. Which brings us to why you're really here. Colonel Hayes stepped forward again. We're creating a new position within Joint Special Operations Command. Counter-Sniper Operations Specialist. You'll analyze enemy sniper patterns, identify high-value targets, plan counter-sniper operations, and when necessary, execute those operations personally. Hunt snipers with intelligence 90% of the time, with a rifle the other 10%. Elle considered this, her mind already working through the implications. It was perfect, the ideal combination of her 2 skill sets. Intelligence analysis to identify threats before they could engage. Tactical capability to eliminate threats when analysis alone wasn't enough. That's exactly what I wanted, ma'am. I didn't leave sniping because I never wanted to shoot again. I left to make sure every shot counted. Intelligence gives me certainty, action gives me results. Then we're in agreement, Hayes said. There's one more thing. Someone who wanted to speak with you before we make this official. She handed Elle a secure phone. Elle took it confused. This is Reeves. The voice on the other end was gravelly and familiar and impossibly welcome. "Elle, it's Frank, Frank Callahan." Elle's eyes widened. She hadn't spoken to Callahan since requesting her transfer to intelligence 3 years ago. Hadn't wanted to face the man who'd invested so much in training her after she'd decided to stop being what he'd made her. "Gunnery Sergeant, sir, I didn't expect—" "Heard about the Colorado operation." Callahan interrupted, his tone warm with something that sounded like pride. "6 hostiles in 18 minutes. Morrison's report says you made shots I taught you 8 years ago. Says you moved like a ghost and fought like a warrior." Elle didn't know what to say. "I trained you well, Elle, but what I'm really proud of isn't the kills. It's that you came back. 3 years ago, you ran from shooting because of one terrible mistake born from bad intelligence. Today, you ran toward it when it mattered because the intelligence was right and lives depended on it." His voice softened slightly. "That's not just skill. That's character. That's understanding the difference between capability and responsibility. That's knowing when to use the rifle and when to put it down." "You told me something 3 years ago," Elle said quietly. "You said talent doesn't disappear." "You were right." "I told you something else too. Remember?" Elle thought back to that last conversation at Fort Benning when she'd requested the transfer and Callahan had tried to talk her out of it. "You said one day I'd need it again. And when that day came, you were ready. That's all that matters. Skills that sit unused aren't wasted. They're waiting, and when the moment comes, they're there." Callahan paused, and Elle could hear other voices in the background, the sounds of a busy office at Quantico where he was currently stationed. "Now go build something bigger than yourself. Take what I taught you and what you learned the hard way and turn it into something that saves more lives than you could save alone. Train the next generation. Pass it on. That's how excellence survives." "Yes, sir," Elle said, her voice rough with emotion she hadn't expected to feel. "And Frank, thank you for everything. Make me proud, Elle. I know you will." The line clicked off. Elle handed the phone back to Colonel Hayes, who was watching her with an expression that might have been understanding. "Master Gunnery Sergeant Callahan speaks highly of you. Says you are one of the best students he ever trained. Coming from him, that's not a small compliment." "He made me what I am," Elle said simply. "And now you'll make others what they need to be," Hayes replied. She extended her hand formally. "Congratulations, Sergeant First Class Elena Reeves. Welcome to Counter Sniper Operations Division. You start immediately." Elle shook her hand, feeling the weight of the new responsibility settling onto her shoulders. It felt right. It felt like the path she'd been looking for without knowing it. Intelligence and action, analysis and execution, the complete integration of everything she'd learned and everything she'd become. Morrison appeared in the doorway, a slight smile on his face. "My team has a request before you disappear into your new assignment." Elle turned to face him. "We recovered something from the first enemy sniper position. The scope from the SVD drive. We had it mounted in our team room with a plaque, but we think you should have it." He held out a wooden case. Elle opened it to reveal the scope she'd seen through her own optics. The glass that had belonged to an enemy who'd killed 18 Americans before meeting someone better. The plaque read, "SSG Elena Reeves, 6 targets, 18 minutes, 0 margin for error. The analyst who proved assumptions kill." "I can't take this," Elle protested. "It belongs with your team." "You are part of our team," Morrison said firmly. "Always will be. Besides, we kept something else." He showed her a photograph on his phone. The 8 surviving SEALs grouped together, Elle in the center holding her damaged M110, all of them smiling despite the visible wounds and exhaustion. "This hangs in our team room now. A reminder to never underestimate anyone based on a job title. Grant tells everyone your story. How the intel analyst eliminated 6 elite snipers with 9 bullets. How you charged uphill with 1 round left. How you saved us all when we'd written you off." Elle looked at the photograph, seeing in those faces a respect that had been earned the hardest way possible. "I did what anyone would have done." "No," Morrison said quietly. "You did what only you could have done. That's the difference. That's why you're going to be perfect for this new position. You understand that the mission isn't about proving you're the best. It's about being good enough when lives depend on it." Elle closed the wooden case with the scope in mind and held it carefully. "Thank you, all of you, for giving me the chance to remember who I am." As Morrison left, Elle stood alone in the operations center that was slowly emptying as officers returned to their duties. She thought about the 6 enemy snipers lying dead in Colorado mountains, about the 8 SEALs who would go home to their families, about the dozens of other sniper cells still operating in the region, still hunting American forces, still waiting for someone to stop them. She thought about Callahan's words: build something bigger than yourself, train the next generation, pass it on. And she thought about the weight she'd been carrying for 3 years, the guilt over one terrible shot born from bad intelligence. Today hadn't erased that guilt. Nothing could, but today had proven that the skills weren't cursed. They were just tools, and tools were only as good or bad as the hands that wielded them and the information that guided them. Elle Reeves had spent 3 years running from herself. Now she was done running. Now she had a mission that would let her be both the analyst and the sniper, the thinker, and the fighter, the person who prevented killing, and the person who executed it when prevention failed. 6 snipers in 18 minutes had been the test. What came next would be the real work, and Elle was ready for it. 3 weeks after the Colorado mountains, Elle Reeves sat in an office she still couldn't quite believe was hers. Counter-Sniper Operations Division, Joint Special Operations Command. A nameplate on the door that read Sergeant First Class Elena Reeves, and a mission that combined everything she'd spent the last decade becoming. The office was small and utilitarian, but the walls were already covered with maps and intelligence reports and satellite imagery showing enemy sniper activity across the entire operational theater. Red pins marked confirmed incidents. Yellow pins marked probable incidents. Blue pins marked American positions that had been compromised by sniper fire. There were too many pins, far too many. Elle had assembled her team carefully. 2 intelligence analysts, both former Army, with experience in pattern recognition and threat assessment. 3 sniper instructors, 1 Marine, 1 Army Ranger, 1 Delta Force, each bringing different perspectives on tactics and training. 1 tactical coordinator to handle the logistics of moving teams into position when analysis identified targets. And Tyler Grant, who'd requested transfer from Morrison's SEAL team specifically to work with Elle. The young operator who'd apologized for underestimating her now wanted to learn from her. It was the kind of validation that mattered more than any medal. They gathered around the main conference table, 7 professionals, who'd been pulled together to solve a problem that had been killing Americans for months. Elle stood at the head of the table, a laser pointer in her hand, and began walking them through what she'd discovered. Over the past 18 months, we've documented 73 sniper incidents across the operational theater. Most units treat these as isolated events, random encounters with skilled enemies. But when you map them together, patterns emerge. She clicked through satellite imagery on the main screen, overlaying the incident reports with terrain analysis and timeline data. 3 additional cells beyond the Colorado 6. Each cell has distinct operational signatures based on their training origin. Cell Alpha here operates in mountain terrain 90 miles north of Colorado. 3-person team, 8 confirmed kills in 2 months. Their signature is spacing between shots averaging 4.2 seconds. Position selection always favors elevation over concealment. They're confident, maybe overconfident. Elle moved to the next image. Cell Bravo operates in border region, 4-person team, 12 kills in 3 months. Their signature is different. They prioritize escape routes over optimal shooting positions. Faster shot spacing, but less precision. Different training, different doctrine, different tactical philosophy. Grant leaned forward, studying the data. Can we predict where they'll position based on these signatures? That's exactly what we're going to do, Elle replied. Every sniper is trained to analyze terrain and select positions that offer the best combination of concealment, sight lines, and escape routes. But training creates patterns, and patterns create predictability. She pulled up terrain analysis of Cell Alpha's operational area. Based on Cell Alpha's signature and the terrain in their sector, they'll position here, here, and here. She marked 3 locations on the map. High ground, clear sight lines, multiple fallback positions. It's what their training tells them to do, and that training makes them vulnerable. One of the intelligence analysts, a former Army captain named Roberts, looked skeptical. You're that confident in the pattern analysis? Elle met his eyes without hesitation. I'm confident because I was trained the same way they were. I know what instructors tell students about position selection. I know what terrain features look appealing and which ones are death traps disguised as good hides. I can think like them because I was them. She turned back to the map. We're going to eliminate cell alpha using precision intelligence instead of massive force. Small team insertion. Establish overwatch positions before dawn. Wait for them to move into their predictable locations. Coordinated engagement on my signal. Mission time estimated at 6 hours from insertion to extraction. The Marine sniper instructor, a gunnery sergeant named Williams with 20 years of experience, nodded slowly. That's a tight operation. Requires perfect intelligence and flawless execution. Then we'll provide both, Elle said simply. 4 days later, a helicopter dropped L. Grant Morrison's SEAL team and 2 Delta Force snipers into terrain that looked almost identical to the Colorado mountains. Same pine forests, same rocky outcrops, same elevation and climate. The enemy had chosen their operating area well. They moved through darkness toward positions L had identified from satellite imagery and pattern analysis. By the time the sun rose, they were in place, concealed, silent, waiting. Elle lay prone behind her rifle, a new M110 with an undamaged stock and a full combat load of ammunition. Grant was 10 meters to her left. The Delta snipers were positioned on the flanks. Morrison's team provided security and backup. Dawn broke cold and clear. Elle watched the terrain through her scope, patient as stone, waiting for movement that would prove her analysis correct or get them all killed. Movement came at 0615. 3 figures moving through the forest with professional caution, heading directly toward the positions Elle had predicted they'd use. Cell Alpha right on schedule, doing exactly what their training had taught them to do. Elle keyed her radio voice, barely a whisper. I have eyes on all 3 targets. Delta 1 confirmed target lock on position 1. Delta 1 confirms target lock. Delta 2 confirmed target lock on position 2. Delta 2 confirms target lock. Elle settled her crosshairs on the 3rd target, the cell leader, based on position and movement patterns. Stand by, on my mark, 3, 2, 1, execute. 3 shots within a half second of each other. 3 enemy snipers down before they'd even reached their intended positions. The entire engagement lasted less than 4 seconds. Morrison's voice came through the radio with satisfaction that bordered on disbelief. All targets down, 0 return fire. That was surgical, Reeves. You called every position perfectly. They secured the area, documented the enemy positions and equipment, and were back at base 6 hours after insertion. 0 American casualties. Perfect intelligence execution. A model for how counter-sniper operations should work. Cell Bravo required a different approach. Their pattern analysis showed they used the same primary hide, repeatedly rotating between 3 prepared positions, but showing clear preference for one. They were good enough to be dangerous, but not disciplined enough to vary their patterns effectively. Elle coordinated precision artillery strikes based on signal intelligence that confirmed the cell's location. Fire mission executed at 0300 when the enemy was in their favored position. Cell Bravo eliminated without American boots on the ground. 0 friendly casualties. Minimal cost, maximum effectiveness. 2 cells eliminated in 3 weeks. Both operations flawless. Command took notice. 6 weeks after the Colorado operation, Elle stood in a room that was technically a conference space, but had been arranged to look like something more formal. Senior officers lined the walls. The atmosphere carried weight that had nothing to do with the number of stars on uniforms. Colonel Hayes stood at the front holding a small blue box that Elle recognized. Bronze Star with Valor device. One of the highest awards for heroism in combat that didn't involve the word medal or congressional. Staff Sergeant Elena Reeves front and center. Elle moved to position, standing at attention, while Hayes opened the citation and began to read. For extraordinary heroism in combat operations on the 23rd of September. Staff Sergeant Reeves, serving as intelligence analyst, attached to Naval Special Warfare Team 7, displayed remarkable courage and tactical expertise when her team came under coordinated sniper fire from 6 enemy combatants in prepared defensive positions. The citation detailed the engagement in formal military language that somehow made it sound both more and less impressive than the reality had been. 18 minutes compressed into 3 paragraphs. 6 lives taken reduced to clinical descriptions of tactical actions and strategic results. Staff Sergeant Reeves's actions directly saved 8 American service members and eliminated a significant enemy threat that had been responsible for 24 friendly casualties over the preceding 3 months. Her combination of technical skill, tactical acumen, and personal courage under fire exemplifies the highest traditions of military service. Hayes pinned the medal to Elle's uniform, then stepped back and saluted. Elle returned it, feeling the weight of the moment and the medal on her chest in equal measure. But the medal wasn't what mattered. What mattered came after the ceremony, when most of the officers had filtered out and Elle was standing alone looking at the bronze star in her hand. Pretty fancy hardware for an intelligence analyst. Elle spun around. The voice was unmistakable, even though she hadn't heard it in person for 3 years. Master Gunnery Sergeant Frank Callahan stood in the doorway wearing dress blues with enough ribbons on his chest to tell a story of 4 decades in combat zones most people only saw on news reports. He was 62 now, and the years showed in weathered skin and gray hair and the slight stiffness in his movements that came from old wounds that never quite healed. But his eyes were the same, sharp and assessing, and somehow both hard and kind at the same time. Frank, Elle managed surprise and emotion tangling her voice. "I didn't know you were coming." "Flew in from Quantico this morning," Callahan said, moving into the room with the economical grace of a man who'd spent his life moving tactically. "Didn't think I'd miss seeing one of my best students get recognized for proving everything I taught her was worth learning." He stopped in front of her, looking at the medal, then at her face. 49 confirmed kills now. "But that's not what I'm proud of. I'm proud that you came back. 3 years ago, you ran from shooting because one terrible shot born from bad intelligence made you question everything. Today, you've proven you can use those skills when the intelligence is right and lives depend on it." Elle felt her throat tighten. "You told me talent doesn't disappear. I didn't believe you. Thought I could just be something else, someone else, and those skills would fade away like they'd never existed." "But they didn't fade," Callahan said, and it wasn't a question. "They were just waiting, like you said, waiting for the moment they'd be needed again." Callahan gestured toward the door, and they walked together through the building and out into the afternoon sun. The base was quiet, most personnel either deployed or in training, leaving wide spaces of concrete and grass and distant mountains that looked too peaceful to hold the kind of violence both of them had seen. "You know what makes you special, Elle?" Callahan asked as they walked. "It's not just skill. I've trained hundreds of snipers. Plenty of them had skill equal to yours. Some even had better raw talent." He paused, looking out at those distant mountains. "What makes you special is that you understand what those numbers mean. 49 confirmed kills. Each one is a life. Each one has weight. Each one matters. Young snipers think it's about the kills. Veterans know it's about necessary kills. The difference between those two perspectives is what separates warriors from murderers." Elle thought about the 6 enemy snipers in Colorado, about Cell Alpha and Cell Bravo, about the teenage boy 3 years ago whose death had driven her away from this life. "That civilian casualty still haunts me, Frank. I still see his face. Still ask myself if I could have waited one more second, double-checked the intelligence one more time, done anything different to prevent that mistake." "Good," Callahan said firmly. "The day that stops haunting you is the day you become dangerous to your own people. Conscience is what separates us from the enemy. The ability to feel the weight of what we do, to carry that burden, and still do what's necessary when it's truly necessary. That's what makes you worthy of carrying that rifle." He stopped walking and turned to face her directly. "Modern military has incredible technology, drones and satellites and precision-guided munitions that can hit a target from 3,000 miles away. But we haven't advanced the human soul. We're still people making life and death decisions with the same moral framework our ancestors had. Same questions we asked ourselves in Desert Storm. Same weight we carried in Mogadishu and Fallujah, in every conflict where Americans have fought. War doesn't change. How we carry it, that's what matters." Elle understood what he was saying. The technology was new, but the burden was ancient. The tools evolved, but the responsibility remained constant. And the only thing that kept warriors from becoming monsters was the understanding that every trigger pull had meaning beyond tactics and strategy. "I'm retiring next year," Callahan said, his tone shifting to something more immediate and practical. 44 years in the Marine Corps. Started as an 18-year-old kid who thought shooting was just about hitting targets, leaving as an old man who understands it's about protecting people. He looked at Elle with an expression that carried weight beyond the words. Quantico needs a new sniper school commandant, someone who understands both the technical skills and the moral responsibility. Someone who can teach the next generation not just how to shoot, but when to shoot and why it matters. I recommended you. Elle's eyes widened. Frank, I'm not qualified. I'm only 31. Most of the instructors there have more experience than... You are more qualified than anyone I know, Callahan interrupted. 49 kills in actual combat. Instructor experience before you transferred to intelligence. Intelligence background that gives you perspective most pure shooters never develop. But most important, you understand the responsibility that comes with the skill. He gestured back toward the building where the ceremony had taken place. You'll teach them to shoot. Everyone can learn that, but you'll also teach them why to shoot and when not to. You'll teach them that the goal isn't to be the best killer. The goal is to be so good at it that you prevent killing from being necessary. And when you can't prevent it, you do it with precision and purpose and the understanding that every bullet matters. Elle was quiet for a long moment, processing what he was offering. The chance to train the next generation. To pass on what she'd learned, both the skills and the wisdom. To build something that would outlast her own operations and create effects that would ripple forward through decades. I just started the counter-sniper operations program, she finally said. It needs me. There are still dozens of enemy cells operating in the region. I know, Callahan acknowledged, and you'll run that program for a couple more years. Build it, perfect it, create methodologies that other units can adopt. But eventually someone else can run operations. Training the next generation is something only certain people can do, and you're one of them. He put a hand on her shoulder and his voice softened slightly. I taught you. You'll teach them. They'll teach others. That's how excellence survives generations. That's how honor and responsibility get passed forward. That's legacy L, not kills, not medals, not operations that get written up in classified reports. Students, the people you train who'll go on to train others. That's what outlasts us. Elle felt something shift inside her, a realization clicking into place. Callahan was right. The Colorado operation had saved 8 lives directly. But if she trained instructors who trained snipers, who operated for decades, the lives saved would number in the thousands. The mathematics of legacy favored teaching over doing. I'll think about it, she said. Seriously think about it. That's all I ask, Callahan replied with a slight smile. Just don't think too long. I'm not getting any younger, and Quantico deserves the best. 6 months after the Colorado mountains, Elle stood in a different forest preparing for a different hunt. Cell Charlie, the last of the 3 cells she'd identified after Colorado. 2-person team, extremely skilled, very cautious. Only 5 confirmed kills, but completely ghost-like in their operations. They varied tactics, never repeated positions, showed discipline and patience that made them far more dangerous than their limited kill count suggested. These 2 are the best we've faced, Elle told Grant as they moved through darkness toward their insertion point. Possibly better than the Colorado 6 individually, just fewer of them. Morrison's team was with them again, along with 2 Delta Force snipers and Emma Sullivan running medical support. The mission profile was different this time. More risk, more complexity, because Cell Charlie couldn't be predicted through normal pattern analysis. So Elle had decided to become the bait. The plan was simple in concept, difficult in execution. Elle and Grant would patrol a sector where Cell Charlie operated, moving with deliberate carelessness, presenting themselves as targets too tempting to ignore. Meanwhile, Morrison's team and the Delta snipers would establish overwatch positions 400 meters back, invisible, impatient, waiting for Cell Charlie to reveal themselves by engaging the bait. It required absolute trust. Elle had to believe that Morrison and the others would spot the enemy snipers before rounds started impacting. Had to trust that when the moment came, the counterfire would be fast enough and accurate enough to eliminate the threat before she and Grant took hits. 3 hours into the patrol, moving along a mountain trail with the kind of relaxed posture that would make any professional sniper's fingers itch for their trigger, Morrison's voice came through Elle's earpiece. Contact. 2 positions elevated 600 meters your northeast. They're setting up on you. Stay casual. Don't let them know we see them. Elle kept walking, kept talking to Grant about nothing important, kept her rifle slung casually across her back while her heart hammered against her ribs. Every instinct screamed to take cover, to find concealment, to become a harder target. But that would alert Cell Charlie that they'd been spotted. Better to play the role of oblivious patrol until the last possible second. Delta 1 has target lock, came through the radio. Delta 2 has target lock, waiting on your signal. L let 30 more seconds pass, let Cell Charlie commit fully to the engagement, let them get comfortable in positions they thought were invisible and uncompromised. Then quietly, execute. 2 shots, 2 impacts, both targets down. But as Elle and the team moved forward to secure the positions, she found something that made her stop cold. The first enemy sniper was female, maybe 28 years old, with professional equipment and expert-level preparation. Everything about the hide spoke to years of training and dedication to craft. Elle knelt beside the body, studying the position with the clinical assessment of someone who understood exactly what she was looking at. Then she saw it, a small photograph tucked into a pocket, partially visible. She pulled it out carefully. The photo showed a young woman, probably the same sniper, several years younger, standing beside an older man in what looked like a training environment. Both were smiling. The inscription on the back was in Russian, but Grant translated, "To my best student, you have surpassed me." Elle stared at the photograph, seeing in it a mirror of her own relationship with Callahan. This enemy sniper had been someone's Elle, someone's proud student, someone who'd been taught with care and dedication and high expectations. War had made them enemies, but they weren't that different. Both had been trained by mentors who saw potential and invested time in developing it. Both had learned to shoot with precision and move with grace and understand terrain like a language. Both had probably started with similar motivations, similar dreams, similar beliefs, that they were serving something larger than themselves. The only difference was which flag they'd been born under, which side of arbitrary lines drawn by politicians and history they happened to stand on. She was good, Grant said quietly, looking at the professional setup of the hide. Really good. She was someone's student, Elle replied, carefully placing the photograph back where she'd found it. Someone trained her the way Callahan trained me, taught her to be excellent at something that would eventually get her killed. That's the tragedy of our profession. We train people to be the best at a job that has no retirement plan. They secured both positions, documented everything for intelligence purposes, and extracted without incident. Mission success. Cell Charlie eliminated. American casualties from sniper fire in the region would drop to almost zero after this operation. But Elle carried that photograph in her mind, carried the understanding that excellence existed on both sides. That respect for skill had to transcend the artificial divisions of nationality and conflict. That every enemy sniper had been someone's student, someone's pride, someone's hope for the future. It made the killing no less necessary, but it made the weight of it more honest. 2 years after Colorado, Elle sat in an office that was significantly larger than her first one. Counter-Sniper Operations Division had grown from a 7-person experimental unit into a full program with multiple teams and operational authority across the entire theater. They'd eliminated 31 enemy sniper cells over 24 months. American casualties from sniper fire had dropped by 87%. The methodology Elle had developed was being adopted by other units, other commands, other military branches. The wooden case with the scope from Colorado sat on her desk alongside the photograph of Cell Charlie's operator with her instructor. 2 reminders, one of capability, one of cost, both necessary. Morrison knocked on her open door and walked in without waiting for invitation. They'd become friends over the past 2 years, the kind of friendship born from shared danger and mutual respect. "Got an update for you," he said, dropping into the chair across from her desk. 27 patrols through the Colorado sector since you cleared those 6 snipers. 0 casualties, 0 contact. Region is completely secure now. He leaned back, studying her face. "You didn't just win a battle, Reeves. You won the war. That entire operational area that had been denied to us for months. Now it's safe, because of 18 minutes and 9 bullets 2 years ago." Elle looked at the map on her wall, showing the region in blue now, instead of red. Safe zones expanding outward from where she and her teams had eliminated threats. It wasn't just me, it was the intelligence, it was the training, It was Callahan and everyone who taught me and everyone I've taught since. Excellence compounds. Knowledge multiplies. One good operation leads to better doctrine, which leads to safer missions, which leads to fewer casualties, which leads to you accepting that position at Quantico, Morrison said, and it wasn't a question. Elle had been thinking about it for months. The offer still stood. Callahan was retiring in 3 months, and the sniper school commandant position was waiting for her answer. The program here is running well, she said slowly. Grant can take over operations. He's learned everything I can teach him about pattern analysis and tactical prediction. The methodologies are documented, the teams are trained. They don't need me to keep succeeding. But Quantico needs you to train the next generation, Morrison finished, to pass on what Callahan passed to you, to create a legacy that outlasts any single operation. Elle nodded. Callahan told me something 2 years ago. He said 94 kills saved maybe 200 lives directly, but students he trained would save thousands. The mathematics favor teaching over doing. She stood up and moved to the window overlooking the training ranges where new operators were learning the skills that would keep them alive in combat. I've saved lives with intelligence and with bullets. Now it's time to save lives by teaching others to use both with wisdom and precision. 3 days later, Elle stood in front of a classroom at Quantico with 20 students who represented the next generation of American snipers. Army Marines, Navy SEALs, Air Force Special Operations. The best shooters their units could send here to learn advanced techniques that would make them exceptional. Elle looked at their young faces, seeing in them the same hunger for excellence she'd felt at 23 when she'd first arrived at Fort Benning. The same desire to be the best. The same belief that skill was all that mattered. She was going to teach them differently. Excellence in one area doesn't disappear when you move to another, she began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd proven this truth with her own life. Skills stack, capabilities compound. The most valuable operators are those who can apply multiple skill sets to the same problem. Intelligence and action, analysis and execution, thinking and shooting. You need both. She pulled up images on the screen behind her. The Colorado Mountains, the 6 enemy positions, the tactical breakdown of 18 minutes that had changed everything. But more important than any skill is understanding why you're using it. Every trigger pull carries weight, even necessary ones, especially necessary ones. I've taken 49 lives in service of my country. Each one was necessary. Each one is remembered. Each one matters. A young female student in the front row raised her hand. She couldn't be older than 22, fresh-faced and eager, and probably talented enough to be dangerous. Ma'am, how do you know when a shot is necessary? Elle thought about that question, about the teenage boy in Afghanistan, about the 6 enemy snipers in Colorado, about Cell Alpha and Cell Bravo and Cell Charlie, about all the moments when she'd had to make the decision between pulling the trigger and holding fire. When the intelligence is perfect, when lives depend on it, when there's no other option, and when you can live with the consequence. She met the student's eyes directly. The goal isn't to be the best killer. The goal is to be so good at killing that you prevent it from being necessary. And when you can't prevent it, when the moment comes and the shot must be taken, you do it with precision and purpose and the understanding that what you're doing matters beyond tactics and strategy. You're taking a life. That's not something to celebrate. That's something to carry. The classroom was absolutely silent. These young operators had expected technical instruction, windage calculations and range estimation and breathing techniques. They were getting something more fundamental, a philosophy of violence that acknowledged both its necessity and its cost. Capability without conscience is tyranny. Elle continued, moving back to the center of the room. Conscience without capability is cowardice. The warrior's path requires both. You need the skill to do what must be done. You need the wisdom to know when it must be done. And you need the character to carry the weight of having done it. The door at the back of the classroom opened quietly. Master Gunnery Sergeant Frank Callahan slipped in, moving to stand against the wall where he could observe without interfering. He was in civilian clothes, now officially retired for 2 months, but his presence still commanded respect from everyone who recognized him. Elle saw him and felt something shift inside her. Full circle. The student who'd become the teacher. The apprentice taking over the master's role. the continuation of a tradition that stretched back through generations of warriors who understood that excellence required both skill and responsibility. She continued teaching, walking the students through the technical aspects of long-range shooting while weaving in the moral framework that made those skills something more than simple violence. Windage calculations became lessons in patience. Range estimation became exercises in certainty. Breathing techniques became meditations on control. When the class ended and the students filed out, Callahan approached with a slight smile on his weathered face. "You're a natural teacher, Elle. Better than I was at your age." "I learned from the best," she replied simply. They walked together through the Quantico facilities past training ranges and classrooms and administrative buildings that represented decades of accumulated wisdom about how to turn motivated individuals into exceptional warriors. 94 kills saved maybe 200 lives directly, Callahan said, echoing the conversation they had had 2 years ago. But students I trained, conservative estimate is they've saved thousands over the past 4 decades. That's the mathematics of legacy. That's why teaching matters more than doing once you reach a certain level of experience. Elle thought about her own numbers. 49 kills, maybe 100 lives saved directly through combat operations. But if she trained instructors who trained snipers who operated for decades, the lives saved would compound into numbers she couldn't calculate. "Thank you, Frank," she said quietly, "for everything, for training me when I was young and raw and thought skill was all that mattered, for believing in me when I made mistakes, for reminding me who I was when I tried to run from it, for showing me that excellence isn't about being the best, it's about passing on the best to others." Callahan stopped walking and turned to face her with an expression that held something beyond professional respect. Pride, maybe. The satisfaction of seeing a legacy continued by someone worthy of carrying it forward. Make them better than you were, Elle. That's the final test of any teacher. Not creating students who match your abilities, creating students who surpass them. Give them everything I gave you, and give them the wisdom you earned the hard way. That combination will make them exceptional. He extended his hand formally. "Quantico is yours now. The next generation is yours. Train them well, train them wise. And when they're ready, teach them to train others. That's how excellence survives. That's how we survive." Elle shook his hand, feeling the transfer of responsibility in that simple gesture. The torch passing from one generation to the next. The continuation of a tradition that valued both capability and character, both skill and wisdom, both the ability to take life and the judgment to know when taking life was necessary. "I won't let you down," she promised. "You couldn't if you tried," Callahan replied with absolute certainty. "You're already everything you need to be. Now go make others the same." He left her standing on the edge of the training range where new snipers were practicing the fundamentals of marksmanship. Young operators learning to shoot before they learned why shooting mattered. Students who would become soldiers, who would become operators, who would become instructors, who would continue this cycle for decades. Elle watched them for a long moment, seeing in their concentrated faces the future of American sniper operations. Seeing the lives that would be saved by their precision. Seeing the enemies that would be deterred by their capability. Seeing the legacy that stretched forward from this moment into conflicts and challenges that hadn't yet emerged. 6 snipers in 18 minutes had proven her capability. 2 years building counter-sniper operations had proven her methodology. Now decades at Quantico would prove her legacy. The mission wasn't ending. It was transforming. From shooter to analyst to teacher. From taking individual actions to creating institutional knowledge. From saving lives one operation at a time to saving lives through generations of operators trained to be both capable and wise. Elle turned away from the range and walked back toward the classroom building. She had lesson plans to develop, curriculum to refine, students to challenge and push and transform into something better than they'd been when they arrived. The weight of 49 lives taken would never leave her. The responsibility of thousands of lives saved through teaching was just beginning. Both were part of who she was. Both mattered. Both defined the warrior's path she'd chosen and would walk for the rest of her career. Excellence didn't die when the warrior stopped fighting. It multiplied when the warrior started teaching. And Elle Reeves was ready to multiply it for decades to come.